You got to get used to change. So you're going to end up having to hire people. You're going to have to build out processes that do not work. Like your processes are not always going to work. What I would recommend is just get used to change and don't always think that you can do it all and start seeking people that can actually do stuff better than you.
Welcome to The Boost, a podcast for home service contractors. We explore leaders and innovators in home services, their personal journeys, thoughts, and experiences with growth, marketing, and succession. We cover the good, the bad, the ugly, and its ultimate impact. Welcome to another episode of The Boost. I'm Zach Wilson, Chief Marketing Officer of Local. Today we have Eugene Geis, owner of Flex Air Heating and Cooling. Eugene, straight out of Texas. Eugene, welcome. Thanks for coming on. I'm really happy to have you. We've been talking quite a bit the last few months and keep running into each other and got to know you a lot better. I'm very interested in sharing your story and your journey into the trades. As I've experienced here, another new and different story. Your home base is
Weatherford, Texas.
Weatherford. That's right. Thank you. Which is 40-ish minutes from Arlington. Is that about right?
It's about 45 minutes. It takes about an hour and 15 minutes to get there. But yeah, we're about 45 minutes whenever there's no traffic. The market out here is just growing like crazy. So I feel like Weatherford is becoming the next Fort Worth or joining that Fort Worth, the DFW area.
How long you been out there?
I just moved here. So I came from Granbury, which is a town a little south of Weatherford. It's not necessarily little, it's just smaller than Weatherford. I grew up in Granbury my whole life. Never really liked coming into Weatherford because that's whenever they started doing all the road construction. It was just like driving into Fort Worth. So we just stayed in Granbury. We had everything else in Granbury that we needed. The only time we'd ever go to Weatherford is if we needed to go to somewhere that Weatherford had that nobody else had specifically.
So is Weatherford becoming a little bit more suburban?
It used to be a cowboy town and they got Highway 20 cutting right through it. So everybody's got to travel through Weatherford to go west. There's other highways you can take. Yeah, Highway 20 is a big highway. So yeah, they got stores all down Highway 20. They're building houses like crazy out here. I think there's been a small pause on the market. So they actually have slowed down. The only way I've found out about that, not that we do any new construction or spec home building HVAC systems or anything like that, but whenever my supplier's about down 51% total from last year to this year in revenue, that's saying something, man. They put a pause on building house a lot out here.
I was just looking it up, but it's growing. Last year, the census was almost 40,000 people just in Weatherford, doubled since 2000. So Granbury has not had that boom.
Not at all. It is also a growing market as well. Like I said, I feel like Weatherford's just kind of joining Fort Worth. So that's why we're growing so much.
We first met in Argyle. So geographically, for everybody that is not familiar with Texas geography, Weatherford is directly west of Dallas-Fort Worth. And then where we met was Argyle, which was directly north, which blew my mind because it was so funny because we joked when we were driving leading up to that. The street view was barbed wire fence with like a longhorn of JB Warranty's address. That was the street view. And we're like, the joke was like, is this going to be like the Rocket X massacre? Where's Victor taking us? Because there's literally no building there. Obviously, we got there and it was a gorgeous facility and everything was great. So anyway, tell us a little bit about the story of Eugene and getting into the trades and some of the things you've done and hurdles you've come across. I know there's quite a few from getting to know you. So let's dive into it.
Yeah, cool, man. So I grew up in Granbury, like I said, graduated high school in Granbury, Texas. Played football, and honestly, that's all I ever wanted to do. But I think that's the young man's mentality is, hey, if you're good in sports and that's all you ever wanted to do is go play football or baseball or whatever you want to play, you always want to pursue that dream into college. And that's not necessarily everybody's. I mean, that's not how it really goes, right? So everybody thinks that way going from middle school all the way up until high school. And then you're just like, man, maybe I am too small. Or you're always telling teachers to shut up. I'm not too small. Or that is a real career as well. But man, to be honest with you, I was very good at football. We played football, 5A school district, had a ton of fun, wanted to go to college. And then right outside of college, I actually met a girl in Weatherford, is my wife now. Her name is Ashley. She's a beautiful woman. So what happened there was she went to a trade school as well in Granbury, and she grew up here in Weatherford her whole life. So whenever I went, my mom was getting her hair done. She went to a cosmetology trade school in Granbury, and my mom was getting her hair done there. I was also a bull rider. So this is outside of football season. Went to go drop some donuts off because my mom was getting her hair cut by my best friend's mom, and dropped some donuts off there at the cosmetology school, and kind of just caught a glimpse of this very attractive lady. And we just kicked it off from there. I actually got her number there. So I asked her where she was from, took her on a date here in Weatherford, and got to meet her family. Kind of enjoyed meeting everybody, and we just stuck together until then. I kind of got to know her family and what they did. Ended up owning an air conditioning business. I've never had interest in air conditioning. Didn't even know what HVAC even stood for, honestly. Growing up through high school and all that, never really even cared. The cool thing was that I was like, plumbing was an option that I have seeked interest in before, just kind of learning that's a trade that I knew that I could go into and doing plumbing. Not residential plumbing. I never wanted to jack around with all the demoing or anything like that. I wanted to do new construction and commercial at that.
Just in terms of plumbing, safe to say that's the easier, cleaner path.
I thought it was easy. Whenever I got my first job, me and my wife started dating, and then we got a little rent house here in Weatherford, little 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom rent house. About a year after we started dating, we got that house. I got this plumbing company. I worked for Century Mechanical out of Fort Worth, Texas. And I thought it was easy until they started making me do all the cast iron storm pipe. It was fun. I didn't complain. I've never been the type to complain about a job, so I just did what I was told. So that's where it all started. Century Mechanical, they were a great company to work for. I just didn't make enough to really pay my bills and see any further opportunities there at Century. So I started talking around to a couple of people I knew, and they said, man, to be honest with you, if you want to make some good money and you want to stay in the trades, the union, you can't go wrong in the union. And I'm a firm believer on that. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with that, but man, the union treated me right. I went in to be a plumber, and I got hired on with a big company called Brandt. They're out of Carrollton. I think it's a little north of where we were at during the convention at Profit X. Is that Profit X, right? Rocket X.
Honestly, they have so many different names. I think the overarching business is Rocket X, and then under Rocket X, they have a bunch of brand like Rocket Bookings, P1. But yeah, the overarching company is the Rocket X.
Okay, cool. Yeah. I don't know what all Victor's got going on, but he's doing a lot. So getting into the union, man, has been honestly a life changer for me and my wife. We actually decided to get out of our rent house and build a house. As a first year apprentice, I started building my house because I was making so much money, and I had the opportunity to actually work overtime, which I didn't have that at Century Mechanical. Never thought I would have got out of the union. I felt like it was a demotion from whenever they took me from a huge project, just being a hand on a huge project, and putting me more toward what I told them I would like to do is a service. We called it retrofit. So they put me on a retrofit crew, which was just me and one other guy. It was my supervisor, and we became really good friends. What that job consists of, doing all the connections between a cooling tower and the chiller. So it wasn't necessarily doing HVAC at the time. I was doing more pipe fitting, demoing pipe and reinstalling new pipe fitting for my welder, my supervisor, to weld out pipe that carries water and all that. So going into all that, I seek another opportunity from my teacher, Siemens. I'm sure a lot of people know who Siemens is. They're a global wide company that does literally everything. They have their hands into everything. They hired me for a service technician. But before I could be a service technician, I didn't know anything about HVAC. So I had to take a couple of classes. And this was into my second year in the union. It's a 5-year apprenticeship course that you have to take. You got to be there twice a night, twice a week. You got to be there 5 to 9. So we started doing troubleshooting on these learning boards in class, and I got really good at it. I was the only one that actually showed interest. Other than one other guy in my class, man, we loved it. We killed it. So I got actually offered opportunity to go work for Siemens, start learning how to be a technician. So I took it because it was kind of dumb not to take it. They did not go by union rules at all. They paid you more than what the union paid you. They can't pay you less, but they can pay you more. They give you a clothes allowance. They give you a company vehicle and all this. And I was like, man, I'm a third year apprentice. I'd be kind of dumb if I didn't take that opportunity. So whenever I did that, it even got better. And I was like, I'm definitely not going anywhere. I'll probably retire here. This is where we get into the kind of the story that you and I have talked about that I've told you. Yeah, I'm just like anybody else. If I can do this good at this scale, that I'm actually fitting in with the journeymans that have been doing this a while, I might as well start my own business. But you got to actually be business minded to do that. Because I know there's a lot of people that do this for 20 years, 25 years. And they don't want the trouble. They don't want the stress. In fact, I had a lot of people telling me that you should not consider starting your business. It's not just going out there and troubleshooting a unit. You're actually going to be dealing with some pissed off customers sometimes. I enjoyed doing air conditioning. I did a little bit different air conditioning than what I'm doing now, but I kind of had this passion for air conditioning that I didn't even know I had, because I did more package unit commercial, but I also messed around with MRI chillers and stuff. It's pretty cool. I was not the MRI technician, but whenever he did give me opportunity to come help him, man, I was all hands on. You couldn't tell me to sit in the truck or just watch. I was all hands on. Although it's a little scarier because you're working in a hospital, you're working on equipment that actually scans a human body that could fry a human body if it gets too hot. The cool thing was, anytime an MRI machine went down, it was code red. You get there, throw your boots on and get there. Doesn't matter if it's 2 o'clock in the morning. I mean, they're not doing scans at 2 o'clock in the morning, but those doctors, they'll trip out if they're losing money the next day. They only have so many MRI machines. I was like, man, this is cool. This is actually what I want to do. But then my wife's family, they were rocking and rolling with their residential company here, a very good, successful company here in Weatherford, Texas. So we talk day in and day out about the differences between what I do and what they do. And I would say the scale that I was at was a bit higher than their guys, not downing their guys or anything, but it's just like, I bet I could go work on the stuff y'all work on.
Totally different stakes, right?
It is, man. It's all control. I work for a big controls company. Siemens is more of a controls company. I'll tell you about the mechanical group real quick, which was us technicians. We were a 4-man crew taking on the whole DFW area. So that's 4 technicians. That right there alone is a heavy, heavy load on 4 technicians. Whenever you got Dallas, Las Colinas, Louisville, you got Plano, and we didn't only just do hospitals. We did commercial buildings, package units. We did split systems. So there's the split systems that actually got my attention on, like, hey, I know exactly what y'all do. Like, as far as residential, I know exactly what y'all do because I deal with the split systems too. And I was like, man, the split systems are actually very easy. And we'd come home and we'd talk at the dinner table about the difference between residential and commercial. And I feel like residential would be a whole lot easier. Hey, can I start demoing some of these systems for extra cash? Because I was still in the process of building my house and we were cash flowing a lot of it, like the driveway, the fencing, flooring, and all that. We were cash flowing a lot of it. So I needed extra cash. So what I would do is work in what we call the boneyard. Any of the other guys that you talk to call their scrapyard the boneyard?
I haven't heard that. No.
Dude, we call it the boneyard. I think it's a pretty cool way of calling your scrapyard. So whenever installers are like, hey, what are we going to do whenever times get slow? You work in the boneyard. You recover the refrigerant and you scrap out the units. A lot of people will sell off all their scraps and just make a little bit of money off of it. You can actually tear it down and make a killing off of just the scrap if you break them down. So I worked in the boneyard at my wife's grandparents' company on the weekends or at night times whenever I needed extra cash. So one day they called me over pretty late in the evening. They called me over and they said, hey, how would you feel to transfer over to residential? I don't have any interest in doing residential air conditioning, but I feel like it'd be pretty easy while what's going on. We didn't notice that we were going to have a grandson-in-law one day that actually has interest in doing this air conditioning stuff. Nobody else has interest in it in our family. And we were going to see if there's any way that we can continue paying for your school and you just come work for us and we'll pay you the same amount. I was like, well, that'd be cool. Then I don't have to drive around in the DFW area. I just drive around where I live. I was driving 1 hour each way every single time I go to work, if not more. They would send me to Oklahoma. They'd send me to Abilene, or they'd keep me in the DFW area, which in the evenings would take me about 2 to 3 hours to get home. That's a lot of wasted time that you don't get paid for windshield time. I can't go into too much depth about what happened, why I couldn't proceed with the company, but the person that bought it went through with the deal and went ahead and bought the company, which did upset some of the family, and it didn't upset me. I was asked by a couple of friends, like, how do you feel, man? You're doing air conditioning, you're highly successful at being a technician, and you want to own a business one day. How do you feel about them just selling the company? Why didn't you get it? That wasn't their plan with me, man. Like, they wanted to,
Right.
but the other guy came through and bought the company.
I'm looking at this at like the father or the father-in-law side too.
That grandparent, my father-in-law, mother-in-law had nothing to do with the business.
What I misspoke, but what I meant to say was it's not like you guys had been together for 20 years or something like that, right? In the grandparents' eyes, truthfully, how well did you know them? Did you feel like you were really close to them?
Yeah, I would say that I was probably young and they probably were overlooking that maybe I was partying too much on the weekends or something like that, or maybe I wasn't the most trustworthy kid.
I mean, what year did this actually happen?
So how long were they in business?
Well, that question too. What year did this transaction happen?
And this all happened probably in 2019. So right before COVID.
How old were they at the time? The grandparents have got to be in their late 60s, 70s, right?
Yeah, probably late 60s whenever they made the sale.
Well, I'm just thinking about it from like age and retiring standpoint too. I'm just trying to paint a picture here. Again, you're starting to get to know them. You're only in the business for a couple of years. And the reality is they're getting older and want to get out. If they were in their 50s or something, it might be a little different because they're like, oh, yeah, we can bring Eugene on. He's interested in this. He wants to buy a business one day, can bring him in the ranks, you know, as a tech, work him up, eventually maybe be a service manager or vice president, and then sell him the business in 10 years or whatever. But like they're pretty much ready to sell the business, right? They're retiring. They're like ready to go out to the pasture and drink some cocktails.
And that was the plan. So whenever they sat me down at the table to talk to me about it, that was the plan. You're going to be on our install crew for 2 years. You got a 5-year exit plan. You're going to be on my install crew for 2 years. You're going to be a service technician for 2 years or 1 year. And then we're going to bring you in the office for 1 year. And then we're going to start training you how to actually run the business side of things. And I'm like, yo, man, that sounds great. I think I've got it made. At that point, I was like, yeah, that's great. I'll get out of the union tomorrow if you want me to. And unfortunately, they said, no, stay there for a little while. We're going to see what we can do, pull some strings. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. So I just stayed in the union.
Are they still alive?
Yep. They're retired now, fully retired.
Was all that genuine? I mean, do you think this opportunity just kind of came up out of nowhere and they were just like, all right, forget this. Let's just get rid of it and be done with it?
I know they were on their way out, wanting to get out of business. I think they were just wishing that they never made the deal with the gentleman they made the deal with. Not necessarily because they didn't want him to have the business. Had this family owned business for 20 something years, or maybe even 30 something years. But now we didn't know we were going to have somebody in our family that wanted to pursue this at such a young age.
Right.
And I think they had some regrets. I can't really speak for them, but yes, everything they were saying that night was true. It was really, I feel like, what they wanted. And I wanted it too. I was like, man, if I could keep this business in the family, that's creating generational wealth for the family. So I think it was all coming from the heart. They really wanted me to have it. They really wanted to not pass it down. They would never do that. They told me that from the get-go. We'd never pass this down, but we can train you and teach you how to do this. And then we could talk about a retirement plan for us and a purchasing amount for you. I was like, that would be great. I think at this time, they noticed that me and my wife were serious about business because I told them, regardless, whatever decision y'all make, I'm starting a business. Now, whether they believed that or not, because I know starting a business isn't the easiest thing to do. To be honest with you, I still haven't ran into too many problems yet with my business. I feel like I had enough knowledge and retained enough knowledge from at least watching them run their business and going to the union and learning all the technical stuff first to get into the trade and actually ace it. And we'll talk a little bit more about Flex Air here in just a second. Whenever I finish up past story, guy pulled through and actually finalized the deal with them, and they got a chance to retire, man. They got a chance to exit their company.
Yeah, no, nothing
Nothing
wrong
wrong
with
with that.
that. Yeah, especially with when they're at their age. It was probably just a function of time. They had this conversation with you and this career path that they laid out for you, and this other opportunity came up. It's a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, right? It's here, it's now. Gene says this stuff, but in 8 years or whatever, is he really going to be equipped to do this or want to do it? He started in plumbing and he started pipe fitting and he did this other stuff. Tomorrow, is he going to go and become a electrician or, who knows? I can see it. And I think it takes a special person and a positive person to not, feel slighted by this. It could easily go both ways. Some people who feel more entitled perhaps might be like, you gave away my business, but you just kind of roll with it. And here you are with starting Flex Air and things are good. Life is good, right?
Life is great. I'm happy with the decision that they made, and I'm happy with the decision that I made. I'm not 100% sure if the purchaser is happy with the decision we've made, but that's none of my business. My business is here at Flex Air. Whenever I finished, so whenever they made that, I still had 2 more years left in the apprenticeship program. I went and finished out those 2 years strong at Siemens. Told them a year before I quit, my fourth year, I said, I have enough knowledge. I have enough hours. I need all this stuff signed so I can go down to the state and do my test.
You're the license holder?
I am the license holder of my company as well. To be honest with you, I thought that was the only way to do it. Now that I learned a little bit more, I can actually get a plumber that has a license and bring that to the company, get an electrician. Right now, we actually started the process of trying to get electrical. I pumped the brakes real quick on that because I'm not fully satisfied and set up yet with my air conditioning side. We have a lot of processes that we need. This is something I thought I was going to be able to build really, really, really quick, but you can't build processes. You can't just hire 20 people and just roll with it overnight.
It's funny. I just listened to a short from Tommy, and he kind of said this at Rocket X. It didn't really stick. He basically said, people come back to me and they're saying, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, and whatever. Or I went and used your vendor. I don't have the success that you have. And basically says, well, this didn't happen overnight. It took me 20 years to do this. He credits a lot of behind the scenes stuff to Al Levy, right? And doing a lot of his process work and building structure and process SOPs and things like that. I would work night and day with that guy for like 15 years building all these processes and making sure that every I was dotted and T was crossed and, plugging in my vendor for this and vendor for that. And now I can do it because we have the processes and the checks and balances in place that have been built over the last 15 or 20 years. But, that stuff doesn't come, the snap of a fingers. Like you just said, you can't just drop in 20 people and expect things to flow and work. You'll blow up so quickly. You don't know what hits you. At the end of the month, we're having a couple on from the Panhandle, and they're on their like third company, and their whole business is build and sell 2 to 3 years. I think they try and shoot for like the 5 million mark or something, 5 to 10 million mark. They can do it because so quickly because they're on their like third or fourth one. They have the playbook already. Like, got to adapt it and adapt the culture. But like you or me, like I've never done it, can't do it in a couple years. I don't know if I can even do it at all. I'm sure the same case is for you. There's no precedent, right? There's no framework. You're building all of that stuff, and it takes time, and you're going to have some failures and you're going to have some learnings, and you adopt those as they come up. Let's just close out the grandparents. What was the name of that company?
It's called Tuppies. It's still Tuppies.
Tuffys.
That was my wife's granddad's name.
Oh,
he
okay,
passed away
gotcha.
in 2001. So his wife kept the whole company going and remarried to another HVAC guy, and he kept it going with her. It's very interesting story. Very interesting story.
Yeah, that is quite interesting. In hindsight, looking back at this, let's just say someone else asked you about this or whatever, and they're like, I'm marrying into a family that's got, an HVAC business, and I really want to be part of the business, and one day I want to take it over. but again, same thing. It's the in-law side. It's not your grandfather. What would you recommend to them, or what would you have tried to do differently to change the course of history and put yourself in a position to actually own that business as opposed to having it being sold?
In my situation, depending on how it goes, there was a
Right.
contract in place before I ever even came along. But if anybody were to have the similar situation, even if they didn't have a contract, you go into a family and that has a business that you ever want to work in, or maybe even possibly take over and own or buy, I should say, instead of take over, you should just lay it down on the line up front. I show interest, because if you don't show interest, they're never going to know. You don't know what you don't know. To be honest with you, don't party as much. If that's a successful business, don't come home and just get drunk every single day, because then they're not going to have any trust. That's not necessarily what happened with me, although I did party on the weekends a little bit and they didn't. So there was a huge difference there between me as an individual and them. Why would you want to grow something for 25 to 30 years and then pass it along to somebody that's just drinking every single day? I wouldn't want to put my business in anybody else's hands that's going to do that. To answer your question, I would probably recommend that you get serious about it and retain as much knowledge as possibly can and talk to those people every single day. If that's the way you want to go, and you want to take over that business and run that business and continue it on your kids or just the rest of your life, you have to talk to them about it, because they will never know. Regardless, just because they have a business, that may be the easier way to go. But man, it's not that bad starting your own business as long as you're professional about it and you have quality workmanship. If you don't have quality workmanship, you're not going to pursue anything at all. Learn as fast as you can. Be professional about it. Try to learn the industry. And if it works, it works. Got to make a deal with them, maybe a retirement deal with them and purchase plan.
The takeaway is sit down and have a conversation, let your intentions be known, and prove your worth.
Correct. It's not that bad starting your own business. So don't always look at it like, hey, that's going to be the easier way out. It's completely fine to start from ground zero and show them that, hey, I can do it and I did it. And we are pretty much neck and neck with that company already, 2.5 years.
And they've been around for what, 20, 30 years, you said?
25 to 30 years. They've been around, maybe a little longer now. We hit the ground running and I was very serious about it. So like I said, if going back, if you're going to drink on the weekends and stuff and not earn that trust from the family, then you're not going to earn their trust. Although in the back of your mind, you know how serious you are and how much knowledge that you do already have to go ahead and do that. You got to be business minded.
So let's just dive into FlexAir here for a second. What would you say the big catalysts, if you will, getting off the ground were for you? You seem like kind of a roll up your sleeves and get dirty guy. Were you just rolling up your sleeves and getting dirty, or were you taking a more sort of strategic approach and trying to hire and get people out on the job site while you build the company behind the scenes?
So yeah, I built the company kind of behind the scenes. I hired my brother full time, got him out of welding. Like I said, I worked for Siemens for a year after I told them that I need to go take my test and I'm going to be leaving after I turn out as a journeyman. And they understood. They weren't going to let me go or anything. I was straight up with them, sat down and had that straight up conversation with them. So I asked my brother, I said, man, I can almost train you, teach you how to do some of this stuff over the phone. All I need you to do is be professional about it and just not fake it till you make it, but just act like you know what you're talking about. Be confident that you are going to get that system fixed whenever you show up to the house. He started residential HVAC before I did. I was never in residential HVAC. So we kind of did this just over the phone. So on the weekends, I would go out and help him install systems. If we sold systems throughout the week or anything, I'd go out and help him. Now, a lot of companies won't let you do that. But since my situation was a little different coming from a commercial, there was no conflict of interest at all. We hit the ground running for sure. We had a ton of fun. Whenever I quit Siemens, it was like a high five. I just joined with my brother and now we're working every single day. He's riding along with me doing service calls. We're actually being able to do installs on the weekdays instead of weekends. That was fun. And it was cool working with my brother. I love my brother to death, but man, he doesn't work with me anymore because he wanted to pursue his own thing and get back into welding. There was never an argument. There was never any fights with us. Now that we're hiring people, He's like, dude, I feel like you got this now. I feel like you got this without me. I kind of enjoy building metal buildings and just fabbing up stuff with a welder. And I'm like, dude, then go do it. You ain't gonna put me in a bind by going to do it. I will have somebody else come help me do whatever you're helping me do. So yeah, I'm very proud of him for doing that because that's kind of like what I did.
Is he
Everything
younger
is,
or older?
yeah, he's my older brother.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's awesome. Are you 100% owner, the sole owner
Yeah,
of
I'm
the company?
100% owner. I cash flowed everything. To start my company, I did put a little bit of money in the bank, not too much. To be honest with you, they say 6 months. I probably didn't even have that much. I probably had about 2 months of my expenses. I will make a lot more money if I quit and go work for myself. I could just start cash flowing it. And it worked out. I did end up putting a lot more money in the bank the day I quit Siemens. So that's a scary, scary thing. And that's the biggest question. Hey, how do you quit your job and go off and work for yourself? It's simple. You just got to do it. There's no rhyme or rhythm to do it. Put a little bit of money in the bank and just go do it. You will gain so much more time to invest in your own company if you go full time for yourself.
Ripping off the Band-Aid is a big part of it. It's scary, and especially when you're a little kid, right? My kids are always afraid to rip off the Band-Aid. They don't know it's quick, right? Like it's quick and
Yeah.
painless. But now
Yeah.
that you're older and you've ripped off the Band-Aid a bunch, it's like, yeah, rip it off. Like yeah, it'll sting for a second, but it'll be fine. And, it's just one of those things from experience. We're starting a new business sites. Obviously, things are pretty fresh. 2 years in.
We just started our third year. I started January 1st, 2 years ago. So we're in our third year.
Gotcha. What would you recommend to anyone out there listening who's eager to start their own business? They're looking to go out, they're very skilled tech installer, and they want to get out there. They feel like they get an opportunity to make some more money and kind of get after it.
So honestly, you got to get used to change. You're going to change because the thoughts going into it are completely different than the thoughts that you gain over time of running the business. We grew FlexAir. We did a little over $2 million in our second year, but you got to get used to change. So you're going to end up having to hire people. You're going to have to build out processes that do not work. Like your processes are not always going to work. It's just like a podcast. Whenever you're doing a podcast, just now I choked up a couple times on my hands because I'm not used to this. I'm not used to telling anybody. I guarantee if I do more podcasts, like I told you, Zach, I'm going to try to start my own podcast, and it's just going to be for local home service companies to kind of put their businesses out there. I will become much better at podcasts. So the longer you're in business, what I would recommend is just get used to change and don't always think that you can do it all, and start seeking people that can actually do stuff better than you. I know that that's hard to be like, oh yeah, there's no other better technician than me because I know it all. No, there are better technicians than you. There's people that know more about money than you and what budget that you're going to have. If you're just going into it as a chuck in the truck and you just want to stay solo, that might be fine. But if you want to grow a business, you're going to have to find people that are much better than you at what roles are in the company. You got to get that org chart right.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I couldn't agree more. It's a big part of it is freeing yourself, getting out of your own way and trusting your hiring, trusting your team, and letting them go do their jobs and be great. I appreciate you being here, your time, courage to, like we said, rip off the Band-Aid. And what a story. We look forward to good things.
Well, I appreciate you having me on the podcast. If anybody can take away anything, man, that's one of the main things I did want to bring up on the podcast was just do it, man. Because if you don't, you can fail, but at least you'll know next time if you want to do it again. That is huge, man. I appreciate the time, and I appreciate you inviting me on the podcast. Whenever I get mine up and going, I'll definitely bring you on it. A couple shots of that whiskey. Maybe have a couple shots of that whiskey that you're sending.
It's ordered. Eugene was the proud winner of the pull-up contest at Rocket X with 29 pull-ups and won, I think it was a 15-year Whistle Pig barrel-aged rye whiskey. So yeah, I might have to do an in-person just to get a taste of that stuff. So thanks again, everybody. It was great to have Eugene on here from FlexAir. I meant to ask where everybody can find you. Facebook FlexAir, I think, is pretty active, isn't it?
We're active on it pretty much every single day. FlexAir HVAC, or you can look me up on my personal one. It's Eugene Geis. Even if you wanted to email me about any questions on the podcast, it's eugene.geis at flexairtx.com. And if you don't mind putting that in the comments.
Yeah, I will. I'll definitely do that. We'll put it in the show notes. All right. Thanks, everybody, and go get them.